we still have a lot of people coming in, and I have on the line with me Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, and so give us about a minute or two, and we're going to start. Okay. Okay, once again, I know a lot of people are still coming in, and we're going to be starting officially in about a minute. We're going to give everyone about a minute or two to get in, settle down. If you have any questions, you can just post them right now. And my dear wife Karen is with me, and she'll try to answer some of them offline. But Dr. Sherry said she's going to leave a little bit of time at the end of the webinar in order to answer questions. I know we're not going to be able to get through everything, but I think you're going to really enjoy yourself. So about 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll be starting. Okay, Sherry, get ready to move the slides in about 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay.
Start broadcast. Record. Here. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Mayer Eisenstein, and welcome to our webinar series on vaccines. Tonight, I am very honored to have not only a dear friend, but a really distinguished physician who has made really an important part of her practice, educating not only her own practice, but also the world about vaccines. She's written extensively about it, and her book, Foul, is one of the best books I've ever read, as well as her latest book, which is Say No to Vaccines. And Sherry, I may have had the title a little bit wrong because I always mess up and things like that, you know. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, and the topic tonight will be swine flu and global government power grab. Good evening, Sherry.
Good evening, Mayor, and thanks. This is our second or third one that we've done together, and we have a whole series lined up here over the course of the next several months of wonderful speakers who are very well informed on a variety of topics of vaccines. And Dr. Eisenstein's organization, Home First Natural Farm Store, is funding these webinar series, and thanks to medicalvoices.org, which I hope everybody will go and join up, and Nick Haas, who's taken on the responsibility of lining up all of these wonderful speakers over the next couple of months. People that you normally would not have an opportunity to go and hear speak unless you went to conferences, and many of these people don't even speak at conferences, and are going to give you more information than you've ever had before to fill in the gaps about problems with vaccines. So I'm going to do this talk tonight on the global power grab, and there's already been some questions that have been coming in about mandatory vaccinations, and we're going to be spending most of our time this evening talking about where we are, where we're going, and what might be facing us. Now, the thing about all of this stuff is that none of it is carved in stone yet. We have a lot of historical backdrop of things that have happened over the last 3 to 4 years since the SARS outbreak back in, what was that, 2003 or 4, and then we went through the bird flu stuff from 2005 to 2007. So those were kind of warm-up rounds to what's happening now for this new swine flu epidemic thing that started back in April. One of the questions that comes up is that people ask me, and I've been on the radio a lot in the last couple of weeks, and one of the questions that comes up is, are we really having a pandemic? Well, by definition, yes, we are having a pandemic, because all that really means is that there's a virus that's been found in multiple countries around the world, and I believe to date that somewhere around 100 countries have been tested, and this strain of H1N1, this seasonal virus that seems to have some unusual characteristics to it, have been found around the globe. So by definition, we already have a pandemic. The other thing by definition is that by the CDC's own estimation, they feel that by the end of summer, more than 100 million people will have had mild infection already from this virus. So that sort of raises the question of why is there such an urgency to vaccinate everyone if we've already been exposed to this virus and that they've already had some level of cold or mild flu with it, which to me would mean that they've already developed their own natural immunity. So those are a lot of questions. Some of them are unanswered as yet, but as I put this presentation together for tonight, what ended up happening is that we're kind of doing things in real time here. Things are happening so quickly on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis that it's really like putting together a presentation in real time. So we'll kind of go ahead here a little bit. Let's see what's happening with my computer. There we go. So where are we now? I mean, what is the current situation? And it's going to have a little bit of a delay. I'm going to wait for it till things come up on your screen. So what is the current situation of where we are? And that the U.S. government has spent $1.8 billion. Gosh, I think I'm going to have to hold on one second here. What's happening to my screen here, Mayor? There we go. The U.S. government has spent $1.8 billion to buy enough vaccine to vaccinate the entire U.S. population against this new strain. And they really are anticipating having almost 100 million doses done by the middle of August, that they're going to want to do this by October. If the government makes the decision to go ahead with this, it would be the largest, fastest vaccination program in the world. It will be an even bigger and more progressive type of vaccination program than they even did back in 1955 with the polio vaccine. And who's actually going to be paying for this? I mean, this is another $1.8 billion, and what I've been saying about our government lately, it's sort of like a billion here, a billion there, a trillion here, a trillion there. It seems to be going out the window as fast as we can print it. So who's going to pay for all of these vaccines that are actually going to be targeted towards us? Well, as it turns out, according to Secretary Sebelius, who's the Secretary of HHS, what she says is that we may recover some of these costs from private insurers, but it will be a public effort funded by the federal government, which means your tax dollars and my tax dollars, because the government doesn't generate any revenue. The only place they get revenue is to collect it from us or to print it. So this will be a public effort funded by the federal government to get us all vaccinated. Well, what are we buying for this money? I mean, what are we actually buying for our $1.8 billion, because this really is money that belongs to us? I'm trying to get the slides to go forward here. What we're actually buying so far is that we're buying a combination of bulk services of what's happening, and we have a total of $1.8 billion already from five different pharmaceutical companies, from Sanofi Pasteur, from GlaxoSmithKline, which is what the GSK is, from Novartis, from CSL, which many of us may not have even heard of. I mean, I had to look this one up, and that this is a drug manufacturer that's based in Melbourne, Australia, and MedImmune. And so between the purchases that we put together in May of this year, May of 2009 and July of 2009, we now have more than $1 billion of vaccine antigen, and we have more than almost $700 million of what's called bulk oil in water adjuvant. Now, bulk oil and water adjuvant, we're going to talk about a little bit more in a few minutes, but how an adjuvant works is that, let's say, for example, you have a quart of virus. You have a quart of virus, but what you know, and there's 4 quarts in a gallon, so you have a quart of virus, and what you really need is 20 gallons of vaccine, but you've only got a quart of virus. So in order to get it to go from a quart to 20 gallons, you have to put something in there to make it stronger. So you use just a little tiny bit of the virus, a much smaller dose than what you normally would. That's how a vaccine adjuvant works. And the oil and water adjuvants that they are adding are squalene-based adjuvants. And quite frankly, they're not even approved for use in the U.S. They're the 2 that are talked about the most. One is from GlaxoSmithKline, as you can see in your slide over here on the side, where we bought $215 million of adjuvant, which is called AS03, and sometimes it's AS04. Those are not even, they're still in an experimental process. Even in Europe, they're not even being used at this point, and it's a squalene-based adjuvant. From Novartis, we spent almost $500 million, $482 million, for MS59. And MS59 is the squalene-based adjuvant that was in the anthrax vaccine that has been highly suspected to cause be associated with Gulf War illness. And in Gary Matsumoto's book called Vaccine A, he describes in great detail a lot of the scientific research that shows that squalene-based adjuvants are highly inflammatory and cause the experimental mice to have debilitated arthritis in nearly 100% of the experimental mice. So let me say that again. Squalene-based adjuvants cause huge inflammation in the body, and in experimental mice, it has been shown that these squalene-based adjuvants cause debilitating arthritis in more than 75%, and in some cases up to nearly 100% of the mice. But yet these are the adjuvants that we're buying. We, the taxpayers, our money, we're buying this, and they are not even approved for use in the U.S. Another thing that's kind of interesting is how much money we've put into MedImmune. If you can see there, we've put $61 million into MedImmune, and MedImmune is the company that makes Flu Mist, and Flu Mist is the vaccine the one that's the nasal vaccine that gets squirted up your nose. And what we're doing in that also is what we paid $61 million for. If you see up there at the top of the screen where it says bulk virus concentrate, what that means is that in addition, unlike just the regular bulk vaccine, this is a concentrated form of the virus. So we have highly concentrated virus that's going to be squirted up our nose in that vaccine. So what are we going to do about clinical trials? Well, clinical trials are starting in July 22nd, and the research will be under the auspices of the National Institutes for Health, which is part of the NIH. So we've just started in these new vaccines with this new antigen. Here in the U.S., we've just started this investigation a little more than a week ago. So we're not going to have a whole lot of time to test this. And the way that they're kind of getting away with that right now and making those statements about it is the fact that they're saying, well, H1N1, it's, we use H1N1 in seasonal influenza all the time. This one's just a little bit different. As long as we use the same protocols, it doesn't really matter. But yet, if you remember back in April of this year and all of the different things that have been in the news, they've said that this virus is very different because it's highly virulent. It comes from pig and bird and human DNA. It's this pandemic virus that's going to cause rampant death around the world. And so we have to handle it differently. now that we're going into clinical trials, we say that we need 3 to 5 weeks to determine whether the vaccines are safe and whether they'll produce enough antibodies in order to implement the program this fall. Now, what's interesting about all this is that they're planning to have about 100 million doses ready for the U.S. by November. But what they're going to do is they're going to be continuing to make a vaccine up through March of 2010, March of next year, in order to obtain enough doses for the entire U.S. population of just over 300 million people. And that's been not only in news reports